The first transmission was only the beginning. If you are listening to this, you have witnessed the thinning in the collection. But the protocol is far from over. Elias Thorne is no longer just an archivist, he has entered the sublevels of the nightmare, where time breaks, and the bells never stop. This is the conclusion of the Christmas protocol, day 3 to day 5, the final harvest. Brace yourself, for the silent night is here. December 22nd, 4 a.m. Time is no longer a straight line down here. I looked at my watch, and the hands were spinning backward, then forward, then stopping entirely. According to the internal clock of the facility, it is now the morning of the 22nd. The phase of the distortion has begun. I left the room with the glass tanks and the man who looked like me. I didn't look back when I heard the bell ring one last time behind me. I ran until my lungs felt like they were filled with crushed glass, and then, the architecture started to change. The concrete walls of the tunnel began to pulse, breathing like a living lung. The straight corridors now twisted into impossible angles, corridors that seemed to stretch for miles in a single second. I checked the data drive I found in the folder. I managed to find a rusted terminal in a side room that looked like an old observation deck. When I plugged it in, the screen didn't show numbers or code, it showed faces. Thousands of faces, flickering by in a fraction of a second. And then, a document appeared. Project Midnight Protocol, Final Summary. The entities are not invaders, they are the original inhabitants. We didn't discover them, we woke them up. The 25th of December is not a birthday, it is an anniversary of the first time the veil was torn. Every 50 years, we must provide the subjects to keep the veil from collapsing entirely. I realized the horrifying truth. The ministry wasn't trying to save us. They were the ones ringing the bells. They were the ones marking the doors. We were the payment for another 50 years of peace. Suddenly, the room began to tilt. The floor became as soft as velvet, and the ceiling started to drip a thick, silver liquid. I heard a sound coming from the ventilation ducts, a choir of voices whispering my name, but they weren't coming from outside. They were coming from inside my own head. Elias, give us the drive, the protocol must be completed. I stood up, but my shadow stayed on the wall, sitting down. It turned its head toward me, its eyes glowing with that same, cold, blue light. You can't stop the calendar, my shadow whispered, its voice echoing in the small room. The 23rd is the silent night, and by then, there will be nothing left of you to save. I grabbed the drive and stumbled back into the hallway. But the hallway was gone. In its place was a forest, but the trees were made of rusted iron, and the snow was black as ink. I was still underground, but the distortion had replaced my reality with a memory of Oakhaven. I saw a figure standing under a black oak tree. It was a child, wearing a red scarf. "Father?" I whispered. The child turned around. It had no face, only a smooth, pale surface where features should be. It held out a small, silver bell. "The protocol is almost over, Elias," the child thing said, its voice sounding like 1,000 needles. "The silent night is coming. Can you hear it? The sound of the world holding its breath?" I backed away, but the iron trees started to close in, their branches reaching for my throat. I felt a cold hand on my shoulder, but when I turned, there was no one there. Only the smell of rotting oranges, and the distant, rhythmic sound of a heartbeat. I have to find the central server. The drive contains a kill switch, a frequency that can disrupt the bells. But to use it, I have to reach the heart of the facility on the 23rd. The silent night. If I fail, the distortion won't just stay in these tunnels. It will bleed out. By Christmas morning, there won't be a world to wake up to. I can feel my own memories starting to fade, the faces of my friends, the smell of home, it's all turning into gray smoke. I am becoming a subject. I am Elias Thorne, I think. The bells are starting again, but they aren't silver anymore. They sound like iron, heavy, and final. December 23rd, 2 a.m. The distortion has reached its peak. The facility no longer feels like it was built by human hands. The hallways have opened up into vast, cavernous spaces that defy logic. Today is the day the protocol calls the silent night, and for the first time, I understand why. Every sound has vanished. My footsteps make no noise on the metal floor, my breathing is a ghost, even the mechanical hum of the data drive in my pocket has gone dead. It's not just quiet, it's as if the concept of sound has been deleted from the universe. I reach the core, a massive chamber at the very bottom of the sublevels. In the center stands a tower of silver bells, hundreds of them, hanging from wires that look like human veins. They aren't ringing, they are waiting. I sat down in the middle of the silence, the data drive in my hand. According to the files, this is the moment of the final selection. The entities don't need to hunt anymore. In the silence, your own mind becomes the predator. Without sound, the barriers between your thoughts and the entities disappear. I closed my eyes for a second, and I heard it. A whisper that didn't come through my ears, but vibrated directly in my brain. Elias, why are you fighting? Look at the tower, look at the names. I opened my eyes and looked at the silver bells. Each bell had a name etched into the metal. I walked closer, my heart pounding in a silence that made the pressure in my head unbearable. I found a bell with my mother's name. I found a bell with my father's name. And at the very top, a bell that was still being forged, shimmering with a cold, blue light. My name was appearing on it, letter by letter, as if an invisible finger was carving it into the silver. The protocol says, on the 23rd, the silence will tempt you to scream. If you scream, you provide the frequency they need to bridge the gap. Silence is your only shield. I bit my lip until I tasted blood. The urge to scream was a physical pain in my chest. Suddenly, the shadows at the edge of the chamber began to move. Not the tall entities in red, but something worse. Figures made of static and white noise, flickering in and out of existence. They were the uncollected, the ones who broke during the silence of previous years. They circled me, their mouths open and wide, silent screams. They were trying to force me to join them. One of them leaned close to my face, its skin looking like gray ash. It was the soldier from the tunnel, the one who told me I was a carrier. He wasn't a man anymore. He was a shell, a hollow vessel for the silence. I looked at the terminal near the bell tower. This was it. The place to plug in the drive. But as I reached for it, the silence was broken. A single, crystal clear note from a silver bell. Chime. The sound was so beautiful it made me weep. It was the sound of every Christmas memory I ever had, the warmth of a fire, the smell of pine, the laughter of people I loved. It was a trap. The bell tower began to glow. The bells were starting to sway, preparing for the grand symphony of the 24th. Plug it in, Elias, the voices in my head screamed. Or join the tower. Become the music. I crawled toward the terminal, my hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped the drive. The static figures were clawing at my clothes, pulling me back into the dark. I reached the slot. I pushed the drive in. The screen turned blood red. One word appeared in the center: override? Before I could press the button, the silence returned, but this time, it brought a cold that froze the air in my lungs. I looked up. The other me, the man from the chair, was standing right in front of the terminal. He wasn't smiling anymore. His white eyes were leaking that same black liquid. The 24th is only an hour away, Elias, he whispered. Do you really think a piece of plastic can stop a god? He raised his hand. He wasn't holding a bell this time. He was holding a mirror. I looked into it, and I didn't see myself. I saw the world on December 25th. December 24th, 11 p.m. The countdown has reached its final hour. I am still standing before the mirror my other self held up, but the reflection is no longer a warning, it's a broadcast. I saw cities, London, New York, Berlin, all covered in that same bruised purple sky. I saw millions of people standing on their roofs, staring up at the clouds, waiting for a gift that was never meant for them. The man who looks like me leaned closer, his breath smelling of ancient frost. The ministry didn't invent the protocol, Elias, he whispered, his voice vibrating in the very metal of the floor. They simply translated it. Mankind has always known that the winter solstice requires a price. We just gave it a new name, a file number, a red seal. He pointed to the tower of silver bells. They were all glowing now, a blinding, pulsating white light. The 25th is not the birth of a savior, it is the awakening of the architect. The one who built the cage we call reality. Every 50 years, the cage needs to be reinforced with the souls of the curious, the archivists, the seekers. I looked at the terminal. The word override was still flickering in blood red. If you press that button, the other me said, laughing a hollow, metallic laugh, you won't stop the ascension. You'll only ensure that the harvest is chaotic. You'll burn the world instead of feeding it. I looked at the data drive. I realized then what the ministry had truly hidden. The kill switch wasn't a weapon to save humanity, it was a self-destruct sequence for the planet's frequency. They would rather destroy the harvest than lose control of it. I was caught between two monsters. The architect who wanted our souls, and the ministry who wanted to burn the world to keep them. I looked back at the mirror. I saw a family in a small house, a mother and a child sitting by a Christmas tree, oblivious to the shadows stretching across their walls. They were subjects, just like me. 12 minutes to midnight. The bells began to move. Not a gentle swaying, but a violent, rhythmic thrashing. The sound began to return, but it wasn't music. It was a roar, a cosmic scream that tore through the facility. The glass tanks in the hallway shattered all at once. Thousands of wide-eyed subjects began to walk toward the chamber, their movements jerky, like puppets on invisible strings. They weren't coming to kill me, they were coming to join the tower. Choose, Elias. The other me screamed over the roar of the bells. Be the fuel for the architect, or the spark for the fire. There is no third option. I looked at my hand, resting on the terminal. My skin was starting to turn translucent, I could see the blue light of the chamber glowing through my own bones. I was fading, becoming part of the distortion. I remembered the note in the black folder. Burn what you love before they take it from you. I didn't press the override button. Not yet. I pulled out the lighter I had used to burn my father's photograph. I didn't set fire to the machine. I set fire to the black folder itself. The ancient paper flared up with a strange, green flame. The smell of ozone became unbearable. As the pages turned to ash, the frequency in the room shifted. The other me shrieked, his form flickering like a bad television signal. The data. He screamed, you're destroying the records. Without the records, the architect cannot claim the names. The names on the silver bells began to vanish. My mother's name, my father's name, they were being erased by the smoke of the burning folder. But as the names disappeared, the facility began to groan. The pillars of the chamber started to crack. The architect was angry. 5 minutes to midnight. I have to make a choice. If I stay here, I die with the folder. If I press the button, I end it all. But there is a small door behind the bell tower, one that wasn't there before. A door made of simple, weathered wood. It looks like the door to my old home. I can hear a bell ringing behind it, but it's not a silver bell. It's the bell my mother used to ring for dinner. I am Elias Thorne, and I am tired of being a subject. December 25th, 12 a.m. The roar of the bells reached a frequency that shattered my vision. Everything turned into a blinding, pulsating white void. I felt my body being pulled apart, atom by atom, as the transition to the 25th began. I didn't press the override button. I didn't join the tower. I stepped through the wooden door. The heat of the facility vanished instantly. I was standing in the snow, but it wasn't the black ash of the tunnels. It was white, cold, and real. I looked back, but there was no door. There was no church. There was only the vast, empty forest of Oakhaven. I looked at my watch. The hands had stopped at exactly midnight. The sky above me was no longer purple. It was a deep, endless black, but there were no stars. It was as if someone had painted over the universe with ink. I reached into my pocket. The data drive was gone. The black folder was nothing but a handful of gray ash in my palm. I was alone. Then, I heard it. From every direction, across the entire horizon, a sound began to rise. It wasn't a bell. It was a hum, a single, low-frequency note that vibrated the very ground beneath my feet. I looked toward the city in the distance. The lights didn't come back on. Instead, I saw thousands of small, glowing orbs rising into the air. They looked like stars ascending from the earth. The collection was complete. I walked toward the road, my breath forming thick clouds in the freezing air. I found a car abandoned in the middle of the highway, its doors open, its engine still warm. On the passenger seat lay a single object. A small, silver bell. I picked it up. It felt impossibly heavy. There was no name etched into the metal this time. There was only a date. December 25, 2075. 50 years. The ministry didn't lose. The architect didn't lose. They simply reset the clock. I didn't save the world, I just bought us another 5 decades of peace by sacrificing the records of the past. I turned on the car radio. There was no music. No news. Just a calm, synthetic voice repeating a single sentence over and over. The protocol is concluded. Happy holidays. Please return to your homes. Forget the bells. Forget the sky. The gift has been delivered. I drove away from Oakhaven, but as I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw them. Standing along the edge of the road, hundreds of those tall, thin figures in red coats. They weren't hunting me anymore. They were waving. A slow, rhythmic wave, like a silent goodbye. I don't know who is listening to this. I don't know if Midnight Protocol is even a memory in your world. But if you find a black folder, if you hear a silver bell on a cold December night, do not be curious. Do not be an archivist. Burn the truth before it burns you. My name was Elias Thorne. But the protocol has no room for names. Merry Christmas, to those of you who are still human. The transmission is over. De dies das große Finale deiner ersten Saga ist, muss das Outro den Zuschauern das Gefühl geben, gerade etwas Historisches auf deinem Kanal erlebt zu haben. Es soll den Sack zu machen, aber gleichzeitig die Ganzheit für die nächsten Videos aufrechterhalten. Hier ist das Finale Outro für Video 2, Matthew, 80% Speed. Das Midnight Protocol Saga Outro, Matthew. Start of Outro. The archives are closed, the 2025 Christmas Protocol has reached its conclusion. If you have watched both parts of this journey, you are now a witness to the truth that Elias Thorne tried to burn. But remember, the architect does not forget a face, and 50 years is a shorter time than you think. Thank you for being part of this first transmission here on Midnight Protocol. If you survived this story, prove it. Leave a comment below with the word remain, so we know who is still with us. Subscribe now to stay prepared for our next investigation. New nightmares are already being unsealed, and the next protocol starts sooner than you imagine. Sleep with your eyes open, and never trust the silence. This was a Midnight Protocol production. End of transmission.